My name is Zahoor, and every day I bring you a new emotional story filled with love, pain, sacrifice, and truth. Today's story is about a young CEO who had everything in life except the one thing money could never buy: true love. And this is the story of how a simple middle-class man changed her entire world. In one of Africa's biggest business hub cities, where shining glass towers touched the sky and ambition moved faster than traffic, there stood a powerful multinational company named Asterian Enterprises. It was not just another corporation with a famous name. It was an empire. It controlled investments, trade routes, international contracts, and strategic partnerships across several countries. Its decisions affected thousands of employees, hundreds of suppliers, and millions of dollars every single day. People across the continent knew the name of Asterian Enterprises. Business magazines wrote about it. Young graduates dreamed of working there. Rivals feared it. Investors trusted it. And at the center of that empire stood a woman who had built her identity through intelligence, discipline, and relentless control. Her name was Olivia Carter. She was only 25 years old, but her presence in the corporate world was far greater than her age. She did not walk into a room like someone asking for respect. She walked in like someone who had already earned it. Her posture was always straight. Her eyes were always alert. Her voice was calm, measured, and impossible to ignore. When she entered a boardroom, silence followed. When she spoke, even businessmen twice her age listened carefully. She was not just a CEO. She was a force. People admired her. Some feared her. Many tried to understand her, but no one really did. Because the world only saw her success. No one saw the weight she carried alone. No one saw the cost of becoming Olivia Carter. Before we go further, tell me in the comments where you are watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories like this. She lived in a luxurious penthouse high above the city, with glass walls that offered a stunning view of lights stretching into the distance. From the outside, that home looked like a symbol of achievement. But inside, it felt more like a beautifully decorated silence. Every night after long meetings, strategic calls, and public appearances, Olivia returned to that silence. She placed her bag on the table, removed her heels, and stood near the window looking down at a city full of life, while her own life felt strangely empty. The truth was simple. She had money. She had power. She had status. She had influence. But she had no one with whom she could be ordinary. No one with whom she could laugh without caution. No one with whom she could speak without measuring every word. No one who loved her without thinking of her surname, her position, or her wealth. Even her engagement had nothing to do with love. A year earlier, her father, Jonathan Carter, had arranged her engagement to Richard Blake, the son of another powerful businessman. It was not introduced as pressure. It was introduced as strategy. Jonathan Carter was the kind of man who believed emotions weakened judgment. To him, life was negotiation, family was legacy, and relationships were assets. He had spent years building power, and he expected his daughter to protect it. Richard Blake fit perfectly into that world. He was wealthy, connected, polished, and ambitious. But he was also proud, impatient, and deeply arrogant. He liked control. He liked attention. And most of all, he liked the idea of possessing what others admired. To Richard, being engaged to Olivia Carter was not about love. It was about victory. Olivia understood all of this. And still, she remained silent. Because silence had become a habit in her life. She had learned early that resisting her father only created colder walls around her. so she stopped fighting openly. She wore the image expected of her. She attended events. She stood beside Richard when necessary. She smiled for the cameras. She managed the company. And inside herself, she kept getting quieter. Meanwhile, in a very different part of the same city, in a modest neighborhood where life was built on budgeting, patience, and small daily sacrifices, lived a young man named Ethan Walker. He was not from a wealthy background. He came from a simple middle-class African family that believed in hard work, honesty, and dignity. His father had spent most of his life doing exhausting work just to keep the household stable. His mother had carried the home through love, prayer, and quiet strength. They were not rich in money, but they were rich in values. They taught Ethan that a person's character mattered more than appearance, that respect cost nothing, and that when life becomes difficult, you do not cheat your way forward. You work. And Ethan believed that with all his heart. He had studied with discipline, worked through setbacks, and earned his position in the operations department of Asterian Enterprises through effort alone. No special connections, no family influence, no shortcuts. He knew what it meant to wake up before sunrise, travel long distances, and still arrive before everyone else. He knew what it meant to say no to personal comfort, because responsibility came first. At Asterian, Ethan was not famous. He was not flashy. He was not loud. He did not try to impress people. He simply focused on his work, and did it with sincerity. Every morning he arrived before time. Every task assigned to him was completed carefully. Every report he touched became clearer. Every problem he handled was solved without drama. He never complained. He never argued to be noticed. He never chased attention. While others tried to climb the corporate ladder through visibility and connections, Ethan believed something much simpler. Hard work would speak for itself. And slowly, without him even realizing it, someone started noticing him. Olivia Carter. At first, it was nothing more than observation. In a company that large, she had trained herself to observe people quickly. She could tell who was pretending competence and who truly understood their job. She could sense ambition, insecurity, greed, and calculation within minutes. It was one of the reasons she had become so powerful so young. One morning, during an internal review meeting, she noticed Ethan sitting near the far end of the table. Others were speaking too much, trying too hard, repeating obvious things in sophisticated words. But Ethan stayed quiet. He listened carefully. He wrote notes. He only spoke once, and when he did, it was to point out a practical issue in the logistics schedule that everyone else had missed. His tone was simple. His wording was respectful. But he was right. Olivia looked at him for a second longer than usual. That day should have ended there. But it didn't. Over the next few weeks, she began noticing him again, and again, and again. She saw him one afternoon helping a cleaner lift heavy boxes when no one else bothered to stop. She saw him stay late after office hours, not because he wanted praise, but because a shipment issue needed to be resolved before morning. She saw him speak to a junior employee who had made a mistake, not with mockery, but with patience. She saw him refuse to take credit for a successful correction when the team leader presented it as a group effort. Small things, almost invisible things. But to someone like Olivia, who lived surrounded by performance and hidden intentions, those things were not small at all. They were rare. And rare things draw attention. At first, Olivia told herself it was professional interest. She asked for Ethan's file from Human Resources. His record was excellent. Clean attendance, strong performance, no disciplinary history, no shortcuts, no signs of manipulation. Just consistency. That should have satisfied her curiosity. Instead, it deepened it. She started involving him in more operational reviews, giving him responsibilities slightly above his role, just to see how he handled pressure. Each time, Ethan delivered more than expected. He never acted overconfident. He never behaved as if the attention meant special privilege. If anything, the more responsibility he received, the more serious he became. And something strange began happening inside Olivia. Every time Ethan stood in front of her office desk and explained a report, her professional control felt just a little weaker. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for her to feel it. And that unsettled her. She was the CEO. She controlled departments, negotiations, budgets, outcomes. She controlled rooms. She controlled emotions. At least, that was what she believed. So why was it that a simple, respectful young man from the operations department could enter her office and leave behind a silence she could still feel 10 minutes later? Why did she begin to wonder what his life looked like after work? Why did she find herself remembering the details of his voice? Why did she feel more curious about one honest employee than she had ever felt about men with wealth, titles, and perfectly rehearsed charm? She tried to ignore it. She buried herself in work. She reminded herself of boundaries. But some feelings do not disappear just because you deny them. Sometimes they grow quietly in the places you stop watching. Ethan, on the other hand, remained completely professional. He respected Olivia deeply. To him, she was not just the CEO. She was a symbol of excellence. He admired her intelligence, her discipline, and the way she carried herself in a ruthless business world without showing weakness. But admiration slowly turned into something more difficult to control. He noticed how tired her eyes sometimes looked at the end of long meetings, even when her expression remained strong. He noticed how she rarely smiled, but when she did, it felt genuine. He noticed how carefully she chose her words, as if she had learned long ago that speaking freely could be dangerous. He noticed her loneliness, though he could not explain how. And that frightened him a little, because he knew the distance between them. She was Olivia Carter. He was Ethan Walker. She belonged to a world of power. He belonged to a world of survival. Whatever he felt had no safe place to go. So he hid it. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. And beneath the professionalism, beneath the routine, beneath the silence, something unspoken grew between them. It grew in the pauses after meetings, in the extra second their eyes held before looking away, in the assignments she trusted him with, in the care with which he completed them, in the strange comfort they both felt in each other's presence without ever naming it. Then one afternoon, a serious supply issue hit one of Asterian's major trade channels. A delayed shipment threatened a contract worth millions. Senior managers panicked. Everyone started protecting themselves. Excuses filled the conference room. Olivia listened in silence, her expression unreadable, while blame moved from one department to another. Then Ethan quietly asked permission to speak. The room turned toward him. He explained the chain of mistakes clearly, where the delay started, how the internal reporting gap made it worse, and what immediate corrective steps could still save the delivery timeline. He did not embarrass anyone. He did not dramatize the problem. He simply gave a solution. There was silence after he finished. Then Olivia said, Do it." He did. For the next 48 hours, Ethan worked almost without rest. He coordinated teams, corrected paperwork, contacted warehouse staff, and reorganized distribution priorities. The contract was saved. The board praised Olivia's leadership. Senior managers congratulated themselves. But Olivia knew exactly whose effort had prevented the disaster. That evening, when most of the building had emptied, she called Ethan to her office. He entered carefully. "You asked for me, ma'am?" For a moment, she just looked at him. The office lights were softer now. The city glowed outside the windows. For once, the atmosphere didn't feel corporate. It felt human. "You handled today well," she said. "Thank you," Ethan replied. "I just did what was necessary." She gave a faint smile. "Most people only do what protects them. You did what was necessary." Ethan lowered his eyes for a moment. If the company falls, everyone pays the price. It was such a simple sentence, but Olivia felt it deeply. Because in her world, people spoke of profit, advantage, and influence. Very few spoke of responsibility. "You should go home," she said after a pause. "You look exhausted." He almost smiled. "So do you." For a second, he looked as if he regretted saying it. But Olivia did not react with offense. Instead, something warm passed through her expression. "Maybe we both should," she said softly. That night, for the first time in many years, Olivia did not go straight home. She remained in her office after everyone left, sitting alone in the quiet, replaying that brief conversation in her mind. She knew she was standing at the edge of something dangerous, something that had nothing to do with corporate reputation and everything to do with the heart she had tried to keep locked away. A few days later, after struggling with herself longer than she wanted to admit, Olivia made a decision she did not fully understand. She invited Ethan to a quiet cafe inside a luxury hotel in the city. Not for a meeting, not for a report, not for work. For something personal. When Ethan received the message, he read it twice. He thought perhaps there had been a mistake, but there was no mistake. That evening, he arrived on time, dressed simply but neatly, carrying the unease of someone stepping into a world he did not belong to. The cafe was elegant, softly lit, and far removed from the noisy streets outside. Olivia was already there, seated near a corner table with 2 cups waiting. When Ethan approached, she looked up. And for the first time, he saw her not as the untouchable CEO behind a polished desk, but as a woman who seemed strangely uncertain. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Of course," he replied, sitting carefully across from her. For the first few minutes, the conversation stayed where both of them felt safe. Work, deadlines, internal systems, future expansion. But then the rhythm began to change. Olivia asked him where he grew up. He told her. She asked about his family. He spoke of his parents, of sacrifice, of the small house where every achievement had required discipline, of nights when electricity failed and he studied by backup light, of learning early that dignity was not something wealth gave you. He spoke without bitterness, without self-pity, without performance, just honesty. And Olivia listened, really listened. No one in her world spoke like that. No one in her world was that direct without trying to create an image. When Ethan asked about her life, she hesitated. She was not used to being asked as a person. Usually people asked about her company, her plans, her decisions. Not her. But something in his presence made lying feel unnecessary. So she answered carefully. She spoke about pressure, about expectations, about carrying a name that had become larger than her own identity, about how success can become a prison when everyone applauds the image and no one sees the human being inside it. Ethan did not interrupt. He did not offer fake comfort. He simply listened, the way she had listened to him. And somewhere between those honest words, between those 2 cups of coffee, between 2 people who came from completely different worlds, something shifted. For the first time, Olivia did not feel like a CEO sitting in a luxury cafe. She felt like a woman speaking to a man who saw her beyond power. And for the first time, Ethan did not feel like an employee sitting across from authority. He felt like a man sitting across from a lonely heart. The silence between them stopped feeling formal. It became alive, warm, dangerous, beautiful. Olivia looked at him for a long moment and said quietly, "Do you ever feel like life gives you everything except the thing you actually need?" Ethan held her gaze. "Yes." "And what do you do with that feeling?" she asked. He took a breath. "You survive it until you can no longer pretend survival is enough." Her eyes lowered. That answer stayed between them like a truth neither one was ready to touch directly. Then, destiny, as it so often does, entered without warning. The cafe door opened, and someone else walked in. His name was Richard Blake. Richard had been searching for Olivia that evening. She had ignored several of his calls. At first, his irritation was mild. But when one of his contacts informed him that Olivia's car had been seen at the luxury hotel, he came himself, confident, suspicious, and already angry. The moment he saw her sitting with Ethan, something inside him snapped. His face hardened. His steps turned sharp. He walked directly toward their table. Olivia's expression changed instantly. "Richard," she said, shocked. "What are you doing here?" But he did not answer her. His eyes were fixed on Ethan with open contempt. Then, in a cold voice, he said, "Get up." Olivia frowned. "Richard, stop. You're causing a scene." Still, he ignored her, reaching for her wrist with a grip that was more control than concern. "We're leaving." Ethan stood immediately, confused but silent, instinctively alert. Richard turned toward him, and with the kind of arrogance only certain men carry when they believe status is morality, he said the sentence that changed everything. "Stay away. This is not your level." The words landed heavily, not just as insult, but as a declaration of war. Olivia pulled her hand back. "Richard, enough." But Richard was already beyond restraint. "You sit in public with an employee? With him? Have you completely forgotten who you are?" Olivia's voice went cold. "I know exactly who I am." Richard gave a bitter laugh. "Do you? Because this looks less like dignity and more like desperation." Ethan wanted to leave. Every instinct in him said that remaining there would only worsen things. But before he could move, Richard looked at him again with deliberate cruelty. "You should remember your place," he said. "Men like you get confused when kindness is shown to them." Olivia stood up. "That's enough." The room around them had gone quiet. Eyes were watching. Staff were pretending not to look. The moment had already become damage. Richard turned back to Olivia. "We are leaving. Now." And this time, with pressure, anger, and the weight of public scandal crashing down at once, he forced the evening to end. Ethan remained standing beside the table as Olivia was taken away. Their eyes met for only a second, but in that second, both understood the same thing. Nothing would remain simple after tonight. And nothing did. Richard took Olivia straight to the residence of her father, Jonathan Carter. Jonathan was still awake, seated in his private study, reviewing business documents even late into the night. He was a man who treated exhaustion like weakness and softness like failure. When Richard entered with Olivia and explained what he had seen, the room became very still. Jonathan listened without expression. Then he looked at Olivia. "Is it true?" he asked. She said nothing, not because she had no answer, but because any answer would expose the truth she herself had only just begun to understand. That silence was enough. Jonathan leaned back slowly, his disappointment colder than anger. "I gave you a company. I gave you trust. I gave you a name people bow to. And this is how you choose to use it?" Olivia finally spoke. "I had coffee with an employee, not a criminal." Jonathan's gaze hardened. "Do not insult me with childish simplifications. You know exactly what this means." Richard added, "If this reaches the board or the press, it becomes humiliation. For all of us." Olivia turned to him with quiet disgust. "For you, perhaps, because all you see is image." Richard stepped closer. "And what do you see? Romance? Do you think men from his world come near yours without motive?" That sentence lit anger inside her. "You don't know him." "No," Richard said sharply. "But I know people, and I know ambition when I see it." Jonathan raised a hand. "Enough." Then he looked directly at Olivia and delivered his decision like a business instruction. "This ends now." The next morning, Ethan arrived at Asterian Enterprises as he always did. On time, prepared, unaware that his life was about to be cut apart. He was called into human resources before he could even settle at his desk. Two officials sat across from him with stiff faces and a file already closed before the conversation began. The termination was immediate. No explanation beyond vague policy language. No warning. No space for defense. Ethan read the paper once, then again.
He asked quietly, "May I at least know what I did wrong?" One of them avoided his eyes. "The decision is final." That was all. Years of honest work, gone in minutes. He packed his small belongings into a box, a notebook, a pen, a water flask, a few personal papers, and walked through the same office halls where he had spent so many mornings proving himself. Some colleagues looked away. Some looked sympathetic but remained silent. No one wanted to risk standing too close to a man who had suddenly become dangerous by association. Outside the building, Ethan stood for a long time. The city moved around him. Cars passed, phones rang, people rushed. But for him, time had stopped. He did not feel anger first. He felt confusion. A heavy, painful confusion. Because he still did not understand what crime he had committed. Except silently loving someone he was never supposed to love. That same day, Olivia's punishment took another form. Jonathan announced that she would leave for another African country to oversee a new regional branch temporarily for strategic reasons. The excuse was business relocation and personal reset. But everyone involved knew the truth. It was exile. Distance. Controlled separation. Jonathan believed distance would erase emotions. Richard believed the same. But both men misunderstood love. Distance does not erase love. It reveals it. It strips away distraction and leaves truth standing alone. In the new country, Olivia continued to function on the surface. She attended board calls, she reviewed reports, she signed documents. She appeared in public when necessary. But something inside her had changed irreversibly. She stopped engaging beyond what was necessary, stopped attending social events, stopped responding to Richard except with formal indifference, stopped pretending she cared about the life being designed for her. The staff at the new branch respected her, but they noticed the silence around her. A silence not of arrogance, but of grief. At night, in a furnished apartment provided by the company, she sat alone with memories she could not escape. She remembered Ethan's calm voice, the way he listened, the way he spoke about dignity, the way he never once tried to impress her, the way he looked at her in the cafe when everything was falling apart. Some nights, she told herself it had all been foolish, impossible, dangerous. Other nights, she sat by the window until sunrise, realizing with painful clarity that she had never felt more understood in her life than in those few honest conversations with a man society would call beneath her. And slowly, she accepted the truth.
She did not love him because he was different from the businessmen around her. She loved him because he was the only person in her world who was real. Meanwhile, Ethan struggled in silence. Finding new work was not easy. A sudden termination from a company like Asterion raised questions. He tried to remain hopeful, but rejections came quickly. Some employers said they would call and never did. Some looked at his previous role with suspicion. Some assumed there had been misconduct. His savings began to shrink. He took temporary jobs, loading stock, managing records in smaller warehouses, helping with deliveries, anything honest that could keep him afloat. His hands, once used to structured corporate tasks, now returned to harder physical work. But even in difficulty, Ethan remained who he was. He did not curse Olivia. He did not blame her openly. He did not tell people his story. He carried the loss privately, like a wound he did not want touched. At home, his parents noticed the heaviness in him, though he tried to hide it. When his mother asked if something had happened, he only said work had become unstable. When his father advised patience, Ethan nodded. He did not want them carrying his heartbreak on top of their own struggles. Still, every now and then, when night became too quiet, he would remember the cafe. He would remember how close something beautiful had come, and how quickly power had destroyed it. Months passed, and with every month, both of them changed. Olivia became less afraid of losing privilege. Ethan became more aware that dignity sometimes asks you to survive without answers. In those months, Richard tried repeatedly to regain control of the situation. He visited Olivia in the new country twice. He sent flowers, gifts, carefully worded messages. He spoke of marriage timelines, public image, recovery, strategy. But he never once spoke from the heart, because he did not have access to that language. On his second visit, Olivia finally looked at him and said, "You still don't understand, do you?" He frowned. "Understand what?" "That I was never yours." His jaw tightened. "You're confused." "No," she said calmly. "For the first time in my life, I'm not." That answer stayed with him like an insult he could not erase. He left angrier than before. And anger, when mixed with entitlement, becomes obsession. Jonathan, meanwhile, believed time would fix everything. He threw Olivia deeper into international projects, expecting overwork to numb emotion. But he began to notice a change in her that no performance metric could hide. She was still efficient, still brilliant, still sharp. But the fire inside her had changed direction. She no longer fought to prove herself to him. And that frightened him more than disobedience. Because a daughter trying to win approval can still be controlled. A daughter who no longer needs it becomes free. One evening, after another empty corporate dinner in the foreign city, Olivia returned home, looked at herself in the mirror, and hardly recognized the woman staring back. The makeup was flawless. The clothes were expensive. The title was intact. But the eyes were tired. Not from work, from absence, from living against the truth. That night, she finally said the words aloud to herself. I love him. Once spoken, the truth became impossible to imprison again. She didn't sleep. By morning, her decision had been made. Without informing her father, without telling Richard, without seeking anyone's permission, Olivia returned to her home city. The moment she landed, the air felt different, familiar, heavy, filled with unfinished emotion. She did not go to her penthouse. She did not go to the company. She went straight to Ethan's old address, a small building, modest, worn by time. She stood outside it with hope trembling inside her. But when she asked for him, she learned he no longer lived there. He moved months ago, one neighbor told her. Do you know where? Olivia asked. The woman shook her head. And just like that, hope turned into panic. For the next several days, Olivia searched. She searched through old records she should never have accessed. She quietly contacted one person from operations who might know someone who knew someone. She drove through parts of the city she had never entered before. She saw working-class neighborhoods with new eyes, not as statistics in an economic report, but as real places filled with real people whose lives had dignity without luxury. Every day she searched. Every night she feared she had come too late. Then finally, a lead. A former coworker mentioned hearing Ethan had taken a warehouse job on the outskirts of the city. Olivia drove there herself. It was not a place any Carter or Blake would normally enter. Dust, trucks, noise. Workers moving under heat and pressure. Nothing polished, nothing glamorous. Just labor. And there, wearing a plain shirt, sleeves rolled, carrying inventory forms in one hand and lifting cartons with the other, was Ethan. For a second, Olivia could not move, because all the months of longing, regret, fear, and memory had suddenly become one living reality standing a few feet away. Ethan turned, saw her, and froze. Olivia. Her name on his lips sounded less like surprise and more like something he had been holding back for too long. Time stopped around them. The warehouse sounds became distant. The workers blurred. The world narrowed to two people who had spent months surviving separation and had never truly stopped belonging to one another. She walked toward him slowly. Tears had already filled her eyes. I looked for you everywhere, she said, her voice shaking. Ethan stared at her, still trying to understand if this was real. You shouldn't be here. I know. If someone sees you,
I don't care. That answer hit him with the force of truth. He looked at her more closely. She was still elegant, still Olivia. But something had softened. Or perhaps something false had finally fallen away. What happened? He asked quietly. She gave a broken laugh. Everything. Then, with tears now falling freely, she said the words she had carried across distance, pride, and fear. I don't care about my company. I don't care about my father. I don't care about anything anymore. I just want you. Ethan's face changed. He had imagined many versions of reunion in lonely moments. None had prepared him for this. He stepped closer but did not touch her yet. You lost everything because of me, he said, pain heavy in his voice. She shook her head immediately. No, I found everything because of you. Those words broke something open between them. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan finally said the truth he had tried so hard to bury. I tried to forget you. She whispered. Did you? He looked at her with all the months of silence in his eyes. No. And in that moment, whatever distance remained between them ceased to matter. But love that threatens power is rarely left in peace. News travels quickly when powerful people are involved. Before long, Jonathan Carter knew Olivia had returned, and Richard Blake knew exactly where she had gone. They arrived separately, but with the same purpose: to end it again. Jonathan's car stopped first. He stepped out in a tailored suit, looking painfully out of place against the rough surroundings. Richard arrived soon after, anger already visible on his face. Workers slowed, curious. The air grew tense. Olivia turned and saw them. This time, however, she did not step back. Jonathan approached his daughter with a controlled fury colder than shouting. You disappeared, he said. You abandoned your responsibilities for this? Olivia stood firm. I abandoned a lie. Jonathan's gaze moved to Ethan with open disapproval. You, again. Ethan straightened but stayed silent. Richard moved forward. How low are you willing to fall, Olivia? From boardrooms to warehouses? She looked at him as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Funny. I've never felt higher. Richard laughed bitterly. He has nothing. Olivia answered without hesitation. He has what you never will. And what is that? Richard snapped. Truth. For a second, even Jonathan seemed struck by the steadiness in her voice. He changed strategy. Come home. We will deal with this privately. There is nothing to deal with privately, Olivia said. I am choosing my life. Jonathan's jaw tightened. You are speaking emotionally. No, she replied. For the first time, I am speaking honestly. Richard took a step toward Ethan. What did you do? Fill her head with stories? Make her feel sorry for you? Before Ethan could answer, Olivia moved between them. He did nothing, she said. That's exactly why I love him. He never chased me, never asked me for anything, never used me. He respected me more as an employee than you ever did as my fiancé. Richard's face darkened. Jonathan's voice dropped lower. Be very careful, Olivia. She met his gaze. No. You be careful. Because today you are not speaking to your company. You are speaking to your daughter. That sentence landed harder than anyone expected. All these years, she had rarely challenged him this openly. But now, there was no hesitation in her, no fear. Love had done what power never could. It had made her brave. Jonathan took a slow breath and delivered what he thought would end everything. If you walk away from this family for him, you walk away from everything. Your inheritance, your position, your access, your future in Asterion. All of it. The workers nearby had gone completely silent. Even Ethan turned toward Olivia, alarmed. Because now the cost was no longer emotional. It was total. Jonathan believed that faced with complete loss, she would finally bend. But Olivia did not. She looked at her father for a long moment, at the man who had raised her through control, polished her through pressure, and mistaken obedience for loyalty. Then she said quietly, "If everything you gave me can only exist without freedom, then it was never truly mine." Jonathan's expression changed. For the first time, perhaps, he realized she was beyond his reach. He made the final declaration. "Then from this moment forward, you are cut off." The words hung in the air, but Olivia did not collapse, did not plead, did not turn back. She simply reached for Ethan's hand. And Ethan, after all the pain, all the separation, all the humiliation and sacrifice, took it.
In that single act, the truth became visible to everyone there. Not CEO and employee, not rich and poor, not status and struggle. Just two people choosing each other against everything. Jonathan left first. Richard remained a moment longer, staring with disbelief and wounded pride. He looked at Ethan as if trying to understand how a man with so little could still have won the one thing power could not buy. Then he, too, turned away. The storm had passed. But life after choosing love was not magically easy. It was real. And real things require effort. Olivia did not move into a mansion. She moved into a modest, rented apartment with Ethan. For the first time in her life, she lived without staff, without luxury systems managing her comfort, without the invisible machinery of wealth smoothing every inconvenience. She learned how different money feels when it is not unlimited. She learned the price of groceries, the effort of routine, the fatigue of building a life from scratch. And she did not complain. In fact, something inside her became lighter. For once, life felt earned. For once, meals had taste. For once, silence felt peaceful instead of empty. At first, Ethan struggled with guilt. He watched Olivia adapt to a smaller life and sometimes wondered if love had demanded too much from her. One night, when rain tapped softly against the apartment window and electricity had briefly gone out, he said, "You can still leave, you know." Olivia looked at him in disbelief. "Leave what?" "This," he said. "The hardship, the uncertainty. Me." She moved closer to him. "Do you still not understand?" He lowered his eyes. "I understand that you gave up everything." She gently lifted his face toward hers. "No, I gave up everything false. There's a difference." Those words healed more in him than she knew. Not long after, they married in a simple ceremony. No luxury hall, no media, no elite guest list, no performance. Just a small gathering, a few witnesses, a prayer, a promise, and love. Olivia wore simplicity beautifully. Ethan looked at her as if he still could not believe life had given him this second chance. There were no headlines, no corporate statements, no society columns. But what happened that day mattered more than all of those things. Two people who had been divided by class, power, expectation, and cruelty
chose partnership over fear. And that choice became the foundation of everything that followed. Because they did not stop at love. They built a life. Using Olivia's strategic mind and Ethan's operational discipline, they started a small business together. Nothing grand at first. A modest service operation built on efficiency, trust, and ethical practice. They understood supply chains, logistics, vendor relationships, and the gaps big companies ignored. They worked from a small office with second-hand furniture and long days. Sometimes they handled paperwork themselves. Sometimes they made late-night deliveries. Sometimes they faced rejection from clients who only respected large names. But they kept going. Because this business was not built on image. It was built on truth, on fairness, on the lessons both of them had learned in very different worlds. They treated workers with respect, paid honestly, listened carefully, solved problems directly. And slowly, people began to notice. Not because of a famous family name, not because of inherited capital, but because the work was good, reliable, human, authentic. The business grew, then grew again, not into an empire overnight, but into something meaningful, something strong, something they could stand in front of with pride, because every part of it had been earned. Months turned into years. Their small apartment became a warmer home. Their meals became celebrations of survival. Their laughter became frequent. The sadness that once lived in Olivia's eyes began to disappear. Ethan, too, carried himself differently now, not with arrogance, but with the quiet confidence of a man who had suffered, remained honest, and still found love. And all this time, somewhere in the background, Jonathan Carter watched. At first from a distance, through reports, mentions, business circles. He heard the name of their company once in a discussion about rising local firms. Then again in a conversation about ethical operations and unusual employee loyalty. Then again from someone who had no idea of the family connection and simply said, "Whoever built that company understands people." Jonathan said nothing. But he listened, because those words were not supposed to belong to the life Olivia had chosen outside him. One afternoon, years after disowning her, Jonathan quietly visited the office she had built with Ethan. He did not announce himself with cameras or assistants. He came alone. What he found was not grand in the way a Styrian was grand. It was not towering, intimidating, or polished into fear. It was alive. People were working with energy, not anxiety. There was order without coldness, respect without performance. And at the center of it all, Olivia and Ethan stood side by side, discussing a problem with one of their staff. Not above them, but with them. Partners. Equals. Jonathan watched silently from a distance before stepping forward. Olivia turned first. For a moment, the room faded. Father and daughter looked at one another across years of pride, loss, and consequence. Ethan straightened quietly beside her. Jonathan took in the office again, then looked back at Olivia. "You built this," he said. It was not a question. Olivia answered calmly, "We built this." His eyes moved to Ethan, then back to her. In that moment, perhaps for the first time in his life, Jonathan Carter fully understood what he had failed to understand before. Money can create scale. Power can create obedience. Influence can create fear. But none of those things can create love. None of those things can create trust.
And none of those things can create the kind of strength that comes when two people choose each other in truth. He had spent his life measuring worth in assets. Now he was standing in front of something wealth had not created, and he realized he had been wrong, completely wrong. Jonathan did not become a transformed man overnight. Men like him rarely change with dramatic speeches. They change through recognition, through silence, through the slow collapse of old certainty. He looked at his daughter and, after a long pause, said the nearest thing to apology he had perhaps ever spoken. "You were stronger than I thought." Olivia held his gaze. "No," she said softly. "I was just finally honest." Jonathan nodded slightly. There were many wounds between them. Not all of them could be repaired in one conversation. But something shifted that day. Respect entered where control had once stood, and for Olivia, that was enough. As for Richard Blake, life moved on without him in the way pride hates most, quietly, successfully, and without regret. He remained wealthy, connected, and visible. But those who knew him closely noticed a bitterness in him that never fully left. He had lost something he once believed impossible to lose. Not a business deal, not a contract, but the illusion that status guarantees love. It does not, and it never will. Now Olivia and Ethan stood together, not as CEO and employee, not as rich and poor, but as partners, stronger than ever. They had survived class difference, power games, family pressure, humiliation, distance, loss. And still, love remained. Not soft, careless love, not fantasy, not decoration, but tested love, chosen love. The kind of love that stands when convenience collapses. The kind of love that tells the truth. The kind of love that does not ask, "What can I gain from you?" but rather, "Who am I when I stand beside you?" And that is the rarest kind. Sometimes, late in the evening, after work was done and the office lights were turned off, Olivia and Ethan would sit together in quiet peace. No board meetings, no family threats, no public image. Just 2 cups of tea, tired hands, and a life they had built with honesty. And in those moments, Olivia would sometimes think back to the woman she used to be. The woman in the penthouse, surrounded by luxury and loneliness, admired by the world and unknown to herself. Then she would look at Ethan, and she would know. She had not fallen from power. She had risen into truth. And Ethan, who once stood outside Asterian Enterprises with a cardboard box and no answers, now stood inside a life far greater than the one he had lost. Not because fate became easy, but because he remained good even when life was cruel. That is why their story matters. Because not every victory looks like wealth. Not every success lives in skyscrapers. Not every powerful person is free. And not every simple man is ordinary. Sometimes, the richest thing in life is a person who sees your soul when the world only sees your status. Sometimes, the bravest decision is not building an empire. It is walking away from one. Sometimes, the greatest inheritance is not money. It is peace. And sometimes, the one person society tells you to overlook becomes the one person your heart recognizes as home. My name is Zahoor, and honestly, I could have ended this story in a different way. I could have made her choose wealth over love.
But I chose something else. I chose true love. Because sometimes the richest thing in life is not money. It is the person who stays when you have nothing. And let me tell you something. I could have made this ending darker. I could have made Olivia surrender to pressure. I could have made Ethan disappear into pain and silence forever. I could have made power win, the way it often does in the real world. I could have made her marry for status, smile for cameras, and spend the rest of her life living inside a beautiful prison. I could have made Ethan watch from a distance as the woman he loved became a memory he was never allowed to touch. I could have made Jonathan Carter die without regret. I could have made Richard Blake believe arrogance is strength. I could have ended this story with heartbreak, because heartbreak is common. But I believe some people deserve happiness after all the pain they survive. I believe some hearts remain pure even after suffering. I believe love should not always lose. That is why I chose justice and love for them. That is why I let Olivia find courage. That is why I let Ethan keep his dignity. That is why I let truth defeat power. Because what is the point of telling emotional stories if we do not sometimes remind the world that goodness still matters? So now, I want to ask you something. Not as a storyteller, but as a human being speaking to another human being. If you were in her place, if the whole world expected one decision from you, if wealth stood on one side and love stood on the other, if comfort asked you to stay silent and truth asked you to lose everything, what would you choose? Wealth or love?